working.
We're live and rolling
I'm gonna
now.
roll off on this side of the picture.
Well, that's your fault. There's so much I can do about that. Are we crooked?
Now it's better.
Now I feel crooked. I realized the other day I was looking in the camera and I looked really crooked. Well, it's because I have a gink in my neck and my head's always been crooked. So it just doesn't work.
That actually explains a lot.
It does explain a lot, you know. Man, we have a funny color this morning.
Oh, color?
We look funny.
The lighting's different.
Looks like I'm blending into
No
the
natural
background.
light.
It's very different than it is over in the corner where we have the windows. So, all right. Good morning. Glad that you're joining us. Let's see, who are we going to have on today? Put my glasses on so I can see. I have a busy coffee shop this morning.
You want to do half pound or a pound? What's the price? $7.38 for a half.
Good morning, Jeremy. Let's see, who else do we have this morning?
Okay. And you want that whole beef?
As we gather our audience, we're going to continue Tom's conversation this morning about relationships. Tom was talking about relationships, and so yeah, we're going to do that. And so we're going to continue that conversation just a little bit, and we're going to talk about relationships because we're having an interesting relationship issue today.
Okay.
We have lots of people in the building who are all having a really good time and enjoying themselves because that's what's supposed to happen.
That's exactly right.
You know, that's exactly what's supposed to happen.
Supposed to be going on.
So we're really glad to see them having a good time. And we're glad that they're enjoying themselves. Good morning, Mohawk Joe. Good to see you this morning. And Walter has stayed up so he could watch us. That's pretty cool.
That's special.
It is pretty special because it's approaching midnight where Walter's at. So we appreciate you doing that. All right, guys. So let's talk about relationships for a little bit. We were having an interesting conversation about relationships, and we've talked about having a little giveaway. Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
So it's funny. If we're going to talk about relationships today, I don't know if you can read that. That's backwards, isn't it? In a relationship with coffee.
I'm in a relationship with coffee. Yes. Obviously, that's true for a lot of people because they're flocking in today, which is a good thing.
All right. So relationships.
Relationships. We talked about actually having a little giveaway. One of the things that we've talked about giving away before has been the 7 habits of highly effective networkers.
Indeed.
And networking is an important relationship that you can have. And you go to network so that you can build a relationship. If you go there simply to make a sale, you're going to be in trouble. It's really about relationships. Life's really about relationships. Sales is all about relationships. I meet the person, they trust me. Trust has to be one of those build factors. They have to get to know, like, and trust me and before they want to buy from me, before they want to do business from me. And so that's why it's so important that we understand relationships and how they work together with networks. Tom and I have an interesting story in that we both went to a networking event to meet the other person.
Yeah,
we didn't know each other.
I went for the purpose of meeting him. He went for the purpose of meeting me. And there were probably 50 people in the room.
Yeah, and for some reason they have us circled around the outside of the room, and it was really funny because the gal who was running the show, she was standing in the middle and she was going around having people introduce themselves, and I introduced myself, and we got around to where Tom's on the opposite side of the room, and I don't even know him. I don't know, but when he introduced himself as Thom Rigsby, I just walked across the room. He walked across the room. We met in the middle. We said, let's leave.
We're going over here to talk. So all this other stuff was going on, and we were just sitting there at the table talking.
Because we came for a sole purpose, and the sole purpose was to meet somebody that we could bring value to, or they could bring value to us, and that symbiotic relationship would be the thing that would make the biggest difference.
That's a big word.
That is a cool word, and I don't get to use it very often, and so I thought I would throw it in this morning.
I like reciprocal.
I like symbiotic because it sounds cool. Reciprocal sounds
like a reciprocating cell.
Or like a receptacle. Like
that's even better.
So, very, very important that you look at all of those networking opportunities as a way to build relationships.
Yeah, so one of the things I said this morning on my show, and you touched on it, is people want to do business. I say it a little different, but people want to do business with other people that they know, like, and trust. Right. You have to be a person first.
You have to be a person. We've met people who at networking events you don't know that they're a person.
Well, they're very...
They introduce themselves as their business.
Yeah, and don't even use their name.
And never use their name. They just blah, 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 blah. And you're like, really?
Unfortunately, though, and part of our live cafe audience could contribute to this answer, but unfortunately, I think that's a result of how a lot of people are trained to introduce themselves.
Yeah,
And, and when you're in the context where the facilitator says, you know, name and business, and doesn't give you the opportunity to introduce yourself the way you normally would, which is by the value that I create, then that's just, I don't like those. Those are challenging.
I went to a networking event in Kansas City. To talk about the one that you and I met at. Went to a networking event in Kansas City. I was invited by a friend. I go to this networking event, and it's a network for Christian businessmen. And so we're gonna have three things that are gonna happen in this period of 1 hour. One thing that's going to happen is that we're going to introduce ourselves. One thing that's going to happen is we're going to have a brief Bible study, and one thing is that we're going to eat. You know,
Yep.
So I figure at least two of those are pretty cool, so I'm going to show up for that. So comes around, there's about 50, 60 people in this room, and it comes around to me, and I don't know anybody there, and so I stand up and introduce myself. Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm a tailgate theologian. And I shut up and I sat down. And when we got finished, I had, with the exception of maybe 5 people, lined up to ask me, what in the world is a tailgate theologian? Mission accomplished. I want people to ask questions.
Ask questions.
And-
So this morning I talked about, I called it Metcalfe's law this morning. That was wrong. It's Dunbar's law. But that you can only truly maintain 150 first order relationships. That anything beyond
true.
that is too much for us mentally to keep up with. But then when you think about that, 150 is a lot.
That's a lot.
When you're thinking about how can I create value for 150 people, that's a lot.
Well, let's take that one step further.
Okay.
You can do that. You can create value for that many people, but it has to be 150 of the right people. Because there's 150
Right.
people on the planet who will suck the ever-living life out of you if you're going to provide value.
And not in a good way.
Right.
Make you hate doing it.
Yeah, exactly. You'll reach the point. And whenever relationships become exhausting,
Yeah.
That's what they
bad
are.
relationship.
it's exactly what they are. You have connected with the wrong person.
Right.
And so you now need to have 149 people.
Yeah.
And look for that one person to fill it up that actually has something that's meaningful. And that's hard. You actually discover in networking, and I use this phrase a lot, less is more. Fewer number of people, greater amount of value. If you can have a fewer number of people in that network, but those people do 2 things, and those 2 things are extremely important. Linda says that 150 is a lot. It is. Those 2 things but if you focus on these 2 things, that'll make a big difference. And what are those 2 things?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I answered Linda's question and I forgot what they were. So I was hoping Joe could jump in here and bail me out. Those 2 things that you need to focus on. Number 1, make sure that they're the right person.
Right.
You've got to make sure that that person is the right person and that they can introduce you to their network. Because if they can't introduce you to their network, I had a great experience with that at an event not long ago where somebody said, could you introduce this guy to so-and-so? And I said, yes, but I won't. And she said, you won't? Why?
Why not?
And I said, because he'll burn the relationship, and it's not worth it to me. I've got to be careful how I play the cards.
Right. You're investing.
Right.
A percentage of your relationships should be at a level that you're aspiring to reach yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, you need to have, if you
talk
have
about that
150 people, you have 150 people in that network, then there needs to be a percentage, and I would say 30%, because I've used that number before. 50 of those need to be people that are at levels way beyond you. Something that you're reaching for, something that you're striving for.
Right. So there's people on the same level. There's people that you aspire to and people that you can help. Right? So there has to be some that you can pull forward some that will pull you forward, and some that are on the journey with you.
And I don't mind those people that are on the journey with you, but they have to be a percentage too. They can't be everybody. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Well, I'm definitely in the right room then.
David said we're frozen. People are saying we're froze up. Tom, are we froze up?
Let's see. Nope, not for me.
All right,
we'll keep going,
it looks like we'll keep going.
The recording will be
fine.
fine.
We've been having issues all over.
Where?
I had an interesting tech issue this morning. I was copying and pasting, and it was copying and pasting every letter but F.
What were you trying to copy?
Well, I was copying from the Habits of Highly Effective Networkers. Well, that has the word F in it an awful lot.
Right.
When you use the F letter, it's important that you keep it happening. Okay. All right. Vicky says she's seeing and hearing just fine. Connie said she's hearing fine. Okay, good. Well, it looks like everything's going well. All right,
Okay.
we're getting tons and tons of comments this morning. Are you
Some
staying
of
up on
those
the
that are
comments?
not the smartest are my clients and customers. Yeah.
That's exactly right. But you need to be. But that's good. Go ahead,
No,
Tom.
that's good. I mean, that's. So I was having this conversation with my wife this morning. That's part of what I do is try to encourage people to think differently. Right? Just because you think differently doesn't mean you're below. But whether we are being paid by them or whether it is part of our work that matters, we need to be pulling people along.
Yeah.
Right? The best way to learn something is to teach it to somebody else. Right? So,
Boy, that's a topic for another day. That is really an important topic, though. That takes me back to when I was 26 years old and I finished my college education, was ready to move on, and I created the self-directed learning project, which was you haven't mastered anything until somebody pays you to teach it to them.
maybe not them.
Well,
There's one teacher that I am familiar with. I won't rat her out here on the show, but she said to be an effective teacher, you only have to be one day ahead of the class in the book. Okay. At any rate, you got to be pulling somebody along. If you can get paid for that, that's
right.
a double bonus.
Right. Absolutely. And don't be afraid to have your clients in front of people that you're aspiring to be.
Right.
Don't be afraid to do that. I mean, that's part of the relationship.
So Jeremy's got a good comment there. One good relationship is far more valuable, far more yielding than 10 mediocre relationships. It will pay you better and it will cost you less.
Right. You're going to invest the same amount of time. You're going to invest more emotional energy in mediocre relationships than you will ever invest in meaningful relationships.
Right.
Ever. And when you, like I said earlier, when you find yourself exhausted by relationships instead of inspired by them, it is time for you to prune.
So Karen had a good comment too. I want to make sure we don't miss that. She said, I thought it was different than a lot of people in that I don't just want to do something for people who use my services, but I actually have a relationship with the people that I help. I don't want it to be impersonal. And that's
Chase that one.
it's a is it a risk? It's a trap that we fall into where we start thinking about our customers transactionally.
Yeah.
Right? What can they give me? What do I get back for that? Versus how can I develop this relationship? And the example I talked a little bit about this on my show this morning. And you never did tell me. All right, Joe, here's a test for you. Who wrote How to Win Friends and
Dale
Influence People?
Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie, thank you.
You asked Siri, but you didn't ask me.
Say that.
I can answer that. We're gonna
Well,
I was
I got
hoping
stuck
that you
on
would
it
go.
this morning.
I've read that one and stop worrying and stop living. How to stop worrying
And start living. Yes, that's a great book.
So,
Paperback and book, and they are well worn.
Yes.
the sweetest sound to anyone's ears is the sound of their own voice. Right?
That's why I
Or
was
the
wanting
sound
you
of
to
their own
say.
name, not the
That's why I was
sound
wanting you
of
to
their
say, well, Eric, I know you know what this is, but you never
I
said
did.
that.
Anyway, ignore him. So, just going into a place and using someone's name, whether you are the customer or whether you are the producer, right?
Or if you're the guy on the other end of the live feed that's saying, I know.
Yeah. I said that anyway. Right? that's just a tiny little thing that creates relationship.
Hey, Ted, it's good to see you too, man. Ted's coming to us from England, so.
So that's 2 continents, 3 continents.
Oh, at least, maybe 4.
Anybody from Australia? We're looking for Australia today.
Tanya, it's midnight in Australia. I did hear from Tanya this morning. I was on the show with her on Saturday. She
Don't
wouldn't
argue.
She wants us to
She
play
should
one
know
together.
better than that. That's what we do. That's what makes it funny.
You were talking about transactional relationships.
Yeah, don't be transactional.
Right.
Make an investment in the relationship.
Right.
Even
right.
if it's a small investment of just using their name, that goes a long way toward developing that and making somebody feel like they're not just a transaction.
When I was a national sales manager for an equipment company, and I would train my regional reps, and we would go into a location, and the manager in there would be talking. This was a common problem. You took an inside salesperson and tried to make an outside salesperson out of them. And the inside salesperson is very transactional. The person came in the building for the purpose of buying something. That's why they're there. The outside salesperson goes into the other person's building with the purpose of selling something. 2 completely different things.
Yeah.
So what I would teach them to do was to move from that transactional part of relationship. So we just started training their outside sales force. It was amazing. We weren't there to do that, but that became an added benefit that we brought to that business. Well, let me spend an hour with you guys. I can help them because they're thinking transactionally. They've always done that because when somebody walks in, they've already made a decision.
Right.
But when you walk into their business, you're now an interruption. And you have to learn how to be an interruption. Right. And you've got to be relational, and you've got to bring some value that's different than that person who walked into the building.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So Jeremy's got a great point here also. I can't read it up there. I have to look over here.
Jeremy has a great point. That's cool.
Yeah. Focus, and this it's what we've been saying all along, right? Just maintain the focus on the other person's need, right? That's before we started the show. I was giving him a hard time about saying it backwards, but when you are looking at investing and growing and developing a relationship, what value can I give them, and then what value might they return, right? Rather than thinking, and this is the way we do it a lot. Once you become a customer, then I'll give you a bunch of value. No,
Give value
let me
first.
give you a bunch of value.
My magic
you'll
triangle
likely-
has give value first.
Right. Then you'll likely become a customer if I give you a lot of value
Unless they
first.
use the magic phrase.
And Joe says unless they use the magic phrase, which is,
Let's have lunch, let me pick your brain.
yeah, pick your brain. Yeah, we can have lunch and you can pick my brain. There's only a small fee associated
Yes.
with picking my brain.
You pick up the tab and a lot of other
And an hourly rate.
and an hourly rate.
All right, we're at 20 minutes.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Todd says, be the interruption that they want to listen to. That's the key. That's the key. And that happens when you make it relational and not transactional.
Yeah.
Makes all the difference in the world. Okay. All right. Walter says he's using the triangle idea here. I became, when I was a sales trainer, I became known as the triangle guy. And I had that little magic triangle that I used. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate, we love our audience. We appreciate your feedback. We'll be in the comments making sure that we get everybody's comments addressed and taken care of. Thank you for joining us this week on The Coffee Shop Show.